Grounded is a game with an inherently built-in difficulty curve in the form of its wide variety of enemies having a massive range of possible damage and health depending on when and where they are encountered in the game. Armor is the perfect way to counter such a scaling mechanic, in addition to it providing helpful abilities, so I figured, wouldn't the game just be so fun without all of that? I started this journey by loading up a medium difficulty save, as I do have somewhat of a care for my mental well-being, and opted to go for my main man, Max. Max's special power is that he has voice lines that are only bordering on extremely annoying, unlike the rest of the characters. Loading into the world for the first time was an opportunity to be as productive as possible, because the early game realistically wouldn't be too much harder than a regular playthrough. As a result, I prioritized progressing the story, such as activating the mysterious machine to begin the laser fixing task, as well as equipping myself with a pebblet spear. High damage would be the key to surviving battles, so a little bit of ant mass murder, or rather a lot of ant mass murder, allowed me to get the Tier 2 Red Ant Club about 10 minutes into the game. Wielding such a lethal weapon made the Might Slaughter a simple task, and the lasers activated. After helping Burgle up, it was time to take on my first main task, the Hedge Lab. Having access to Burgle's lab allowed me to scout out my next objective, but it didn't really help because they're just static images that don't tell me anything. Arriving at the Hedge Lab and ziplining my way into the lab was a fairly basic and smooth process, but once inside the lab, I was noticing a strange phenomenon taking place. I would be able to go in and take out the occasional robot, but I would turn my back to find three others charging up their wee little attacks that just so happened to eliminate all of my health. Long story short, I was dying. A lot. Nonetheless, I persevered, and my practiced roof parkour skills led to my ultimate success in finding all of the password fragments. Alas, the relative ease with which I was able to complete the Hedge Lab would not translate to encounters I had later on in the playthrough. A bit of mashing keys later, and the super chip was ultimately mine. The next step was to complete the Pond Lab, and if I were to summarize my experience in the Pond Lab, I would call it one painful little guy. For those who are unaware, getting into the Pond Lab requires you spend a lot of time underwater, and the intended way to beat the lab is to make one of the two pieces of headgear that give you loads of extra breathing time underwater. I, however, would not be so fortunate as to be able to use them. Nonetheless, the plan was simple. Step 1. Acquire the Spider Fang Dagger. Well, this was less of a step and more of a 2-hour journey. The Spider Fang Dagger requires a whopping 4 spider venom to create, which means that this little naked fella is going hunting. As I'm sure anyone who's played Grounded is aware of, wolf spiders are a massive threat, especially in the early game, when you have nowhere near enough damage output to compete with their massive health bars and aggressive attack patterns. Nonetheless, I persevered and, yeah, it hurt. Also, a wolf spider will always one-hit the armorless player due to the venom it inflicts, so my strategy was to plop down a respawn point next to a wolf spider and keep on hitting it and then dying, hoping that my damage will overtake the health it regains when I respawn. And so die I did, over and over and over again, until at long last, it was mine. Step 2. Kill some tadpoles and gather some crafting materials to make the liquid gills smoothie. Very easy. Step 3. Get the Mertein mutation, but read the article on how to get it wrong and fail. Also, don't forget to save your recording of you getting into the Pond Lab the first time, so you don't have to reload a save and go through the entire painful process all over again. Step 4. Get into the gosh dang diggity darn lab, which as a step sort of has its own 3 subsections. First, you have to swim into the lab and just barely register your biometric signature. I believe it is actually impossible to do this without dying, so just another one on the scoreboard, I guess. Then, swim back into the lab and set a respawn point. Finally, make sure you activate all the triggers and unlock the lab itself, always ensuring that the steps are properly buffered by dying a ton. Step 5. Beat the absolute stuffing out of a ridiculous amount of very angry robots for quite a while. And then get the Pond Lab Super Chip. With that experience behind me, it was time to move on to the Haze Lab. Initially, I was thinking that this would be a similarly difficult situation, but fortunately, all that had to be done was mixing up a gastro goo smoothie to give me resistance to the haze, and then plugging up the crack in the gas canister. After that, it was just a matter of stealing unborn children to blow up a wall, and then beating the combat section that really didn't seem that bad. Or maybe I'm becoming desensitized to dying. I don't know. All jokes aside, I have no idea what happened. I don't know how I beat it so easily. The moral of the story is that I done diggity did it. So, yay. Before I moved on to the Black Ant Lab, I figured that there was need for a bit of an upgrade in terms of the weapons I was using, so it was time to beat up some ant lions. This went smoothly, and I even got a bit of help from a wolf spider. A mere 19 ant lions later, and I had myself a tier 3 greatsword. At this point, you should really know the drill for these labs. Bomb go boom, I go whack, robot go die, I whack more, I die, and I cry. Getting through the linear lab was really no issue, and it was finally time for the assistant manager boss fight. As you may be able to imagine, this was no small task, as the boss dishes out high damage while also boasting a pretty ridiculous health pool. The boss itself, however, was the least of my problems, as the myriad of enemies it summoned and the stage hazards such as laser beams and electrical shocks accounted for 90% of my deaths. If there's anyone wondering about any legitimately good tips for the assistant manager boss fight, especially armorless, the best advice I have would be make sure you have a lot of fast acting healing items such as granola bars. If you're able to successfully manage your inventory well, then ultimately you'll be able to out heal the damage you're taking so long as you choose your healing times wisely. The fight was a constant cycle of hitting the assistant manager, killing its cronies, playing jump rope with lasers, healing myself, and dying until finally I got the god run and managed to take the boss out. With the assistant manager keycard in my possession, I was done with the labs. This concludes the first part of this YouTube series where I will be beating Grounded without armor. If you could subscribe, that would be greatly appreciated, and if you enjoyed the video, a like would also be just fine. If you didn't like the video, ouch, but whatever, I must implore you to stick around for the next part of the series where I will be taking out the Broodmother and Orchid Mantis bosses. Have a nice day, and goodbye.